I used to love driving at night. The empty roads, the quiet hum of the engine, the feeling of having the whole world to myself. It was my therapy. But that all ended on Highway 17. The night I broke the one rule every driver on that road knows. Never stop for a car with its hazards on. My name is Lee, and this is the story of what I picked up. I was cutting through the backcountry to get to my sister's New Placia, remote airbnb shed rented for a riding retreat. My GPS had glitched an hour back, and my phone service was a joke. Just me, my old sedan, and about 60 miles of pine forest on either side of the road. I was low on gas, tired, and starting to feel that prickling sensation on the back of my neck you get when you realize you haven't seen another car in 20 minutes. That's when I saw them, 2 pinpricks of crimson, blinking in sync about a quarter mile ahead. As I got closer, the shape of an old station wagon materialized on the shoulder. My first thought was relief another human being. My second thought was the rule. Just drive past, Lee. Keep your eyes forward. But I saw a figure, a man, standing beside the driver's door, one hand raised in a hesitant wave. He looked normal. Desperate, but normal. I slowed down. I know. What was I thinking? My mom's voice was screaming in my head, but he looked like someone's dad. He had a plaid shirt on. I rolled my passenger window down an inch. You okay? I called out. His voice was raspy, strained. Battery's dead. Completely dead. Can't even get a click. Do you have jumper cables? I did. They were in my trunk, still in the packaging. A gift from my paranoid father. I sat there for what felt like a full minute, the engine idling. The complete silence from his car was unnerving. No radio, no dome light, nothing. Just those 2 red eyes blinking, blinking. I made a decision. I have cables. I shouted, "I'll pull up ahead of you." It felt safer than stopping behind him. I drove about 50 feet past, pulled onto the narrow shoulder, and put my car in park. My heart was hammering. I took a deep breath. This was just being a decent person, right? Helping a stranger. I looked in my rearview mirror. He was still standing there, a dark cutout against the red glow. He hadn't moved an inch. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. His hazard lights. They weren't blinking irregularly. They were perfectly, metronomically steady. 1001, 1002. Exactly 1 second on, 1 second off. I popped my hood and got out, the cables in hand. The air was cold and smelled of damp pine and gasoline. "Okay," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Let's get you going." He walked toward me, his steps slow and measured. He never said thank you. He just stopped a few feet away and pointed a blunt finger at my battery. Positive first, he said, his voice flat. I fumbled with the clamps, my flashlight shaking. I connected my battery, the clamp biting onto the terminal with a sharp click. Your turn, I said, stepping back. He didn't move. He just stared at the open hood of my car. You need to start your car, he stated. It wasn't a suggestion. A cold lump formed in my throat. The procedure is to connect the dead battery second. Everyone knows that. I think you should hook yours up first, I said, my voice trembling. He slowly turned his head to look at me. The light from my headlights finally caught his face. He was pale, his features bland and forgettable, but his eyes, they didn't seem to reflect the light. They were like two dark holes. He took a small step forward. That's when you guys would have run, right? Got back in the car and peeled out. What's the weirdest gut feeling you've ever ignored? Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. I lunged for my driver's door, yanked it open, and slid in. My hands were slick on the keys. I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, but it was wrong. It wasn't my car's usual purr. It was a deep, guttural snarl, revving high and frantic without me touching the gas. The RPM needle was pinned in the red. The headlights blazing from my car now illuminated his station wagon clearly for the first time. The back seat was packed, floor to ceiling, with dark, lumpy shapes, like bags of soil or something else. I slammed the gear shift into drive and stomped on the accelerator. The tires screamed, spitting gravel. I didn't look back. I just watched the speedometer climb. 50, 70, 90. I was sobbing, gripping the wheel. I drove like that for 10 minutes, the engine still emitting that unnatural roar. Only when I saw the dim glow of a gas station sign in the distance did I dare to glance in my rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. I let out a shuddering breath. I'd made it. I was safe. I pulled into the weak pool of light, my body shaking. I needed to disconnect those cables. I needed to think. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. With trembling hands, I got out and went to the hood. The jumper cables were still attached. I reached for the positive clamp on my battery. It was ice cold. As I pulled it free, I heard a sound. A slow, steady click, click, click coming from behind my car. I froze. It was the sound of a hazard light relay. I turned slowly. There was nothing there, just the empty road and the dark woods. I shone my phone light at the ground, and that's when I saw them. Two deep, fresh gouges in the asphalt, starting right behind my rear tires. Drag marks. Something had been hooked to my car. Something I had pulled away from that station wagon. I followed the marks with my light. They led around the side of the gas station building, into the total blackness. The clicking stopped. A new sound began. A soft, wet, dragging sound, like a heavy sack being pulled over gravel. It was coming from the woods, from where that single red light had just winked out. It was moving, not toward the road, toward the back of the gas station, toward the lone, dark attendance booth. I was in my car and speeding away before I even processed the thought. In my mirror, I saw the fluorescent lights of the gas station flicker once, and then go out entirely. I made it to my sister's air blimp. I didn't tell her what happened. I just said I had car trouble. For a week, I tried to convince myself it was a traumatic shock, a hallucination born of fatigue and fear. I had the car thoroughly inspected. The mechanic found nothing wrong, except for one odd note. He said my battery was completely, utterly drained, as if it had been running something massive all night. And there was a faint, greasy black residue on the positive terminal that wouldn't wash off. Last night, I went out to my car to grab my charger. As I passed the rear bumper, something caught the light, snagged on the tow hitch. Something I must have picked up on that dark highway. I bent down to look. It was a short, twisted strand of something fibrous and black, like petrified root or old, oil-soaked cloth. As I reached out to touch it, my motion sensor porch light clicked off, plunging me into darkness. And from the woods at the edge of my sister's property, down that long, dark country road, I heard it. Just once, a familiar, patient click, and I finally understood. I didn't just give that man a jump that night. I gave his cargo a ride. And some things, once you pick them up, you can never truly put down. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt that chill on a lonely road, you're not alone. Please like and subscribe for more tales from the dark side. And let me know in the comments, do you check your rear bumper before you get in your car at night? My grandmother's final rule was simple. Never open the music box. She spent my entire life drilling her strange little commandments into my head. Don't bring fresh cut flowers into the house after sunset. Always leave a bowl of salt by the back door. And above all, never, ever open the ornate silver music box she kept on her mantle. She died 3 weeks ago, and I, Rachel, inherited her creaky old Victorian house and everything in it. I thought her rules were just the charming eccentricities of a sweet old lady. I was wrong. They were warnings. The house felt different as soon as the estate lawyer handed me the keys. It wasn't just empty, it was watchful. I decided to stay there while I sorted through her lifetime of belongings. The first night, I broke a rule without even thinking. I came home with a bouquet of daisies from the market. It was 7:30 p.m., technically after sunset. I placed them in a vase on the kitchen table. An hour later, every single petal had turned black and brittle, as if burned from the inside out. I told myself it was a coincidence, a draft, maybe some weird chemical in the water. The next oddity was the salt. Grandma's rule was to keep a wooden bowl of plain salt on the floor by the back door, replenished every Sunday. I, being a pragmatic and slightly skeptical 28-year-old, saw it as a weird dust collector and put it in a cupboard. That night, I was woken by a sound from the kitchen, a slow, dragging scrape, like something heavy being pulled across the old linoleum. When I checked, there was nothing, but in the morning, a trail of gritty, gray sludge led from the back door to the center of the kitchen floor, ending in a damp, sour-smelling patch. Okay, so maybe there was a logical explanation. An animal, a leak. I cleaned the mess, my heart doing a nervous tap dance against my ribs. I even, reluctantly, put the salt bowl back. But the big thing, the centerpiece of her collection, was the music box. It sat in my now clean living room, gleaming dully under the lamp Id brought from my apartment. It was beautiful, intricate silver filigree, depicting twisting vines and strange, unidentifiable berries. The clasp was a simple, inviting latch. What about you guys? Did you ever have a family rule that seemed totally bizarre growing up? Let me know in the comments. Curiosity is a poison that tastes like honey. Every time I walked past that music box, my fingers itched. What was so dangerous inside? A cursed jewel, a lock of monster hair, or was it just a fragile ballerina and a chime that played Greensleeves? Grandma's voice in my head was a fading echo. Never open it, Rachel. Some doors aren't meant to be cracked, even a little. But she wasn't here anymore, and I rationalized it. It'd just look, not open it all the way. Just see if the latch worked. The metal was shockingly cold. With a soft click, the latch released. I didn't lift the lid. Not yet. I just stared at the tiny dark gap it created. A smell drifted out. Not dust or old wood. It was the smell of wet earth, of a deep forest floor where sunlight never reaches. And something else, something coppery and sweet. My breath hitched. I went to close it, but my hand, moving on its own, gently lifted the lid. There was no ballerina. Instead, a complex, sinister mechanism of blackened gears, and tiny, needle-like silver thorns sat inside. And in the very center, a recessed space that was just empty, a void. But as I peered in, the void peered back. A pressure built in the room. A silence so thick it felt like cotton in my ears. Then the music began. Not from the box. It was inside my head. A faint, discordant lullaby, played on instruments that didn't exist. I slammed the lid shut. Nothing happened for the rest of the night. No sounds, no smells, no trails of sludge. The house was just a house. I felt a wave of foolish relief, an overactive imagination, grief, and a weird heirloom. I'd spooked myself. I even laughed a little. A shaky, nervous sound in the quiet. False safety is the universe's favorite prank. I went to bed, and for the first time, I slept deeply. I woke because the lullaby was back. This time, it wasn't in my head. It was a faint, physical sound, drifting up from downstairs. The same discordant tune, tinkling and wrong. My blood turned to ice. I got up, my legs trembling. I had to know. I crept down the stairs, each creak sounding like a gunshot. The living room was empty. The music box was closed, but the salt bowl by the back door, it was full of a bubbling, black liquid that hissed softly. I backed away, my back hitting the wall. A cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing the candle I'd left burning. In the sudden, profound darkness, I heard a new sound. A wet, rhythmic drip, 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 coming from the corner, where my grandmother's old rocking chair sat. And then the chair began to rock. On its own, a whisper brushed against my ear. Not a voice, but the idea of a voice made from rustling leaves and breaking roots. You opened the door. I ran. I don't even remember the decision. My body just did it. I fled to the kitchen, fumbling for the light switch. The fluorescent tube flickered on, revealing the room. And there, pressed against the glass of the back door, was a face. It was my grandmother's face, but stretched and wrong, like bark growing over her features. Her eyes were solid, glossy black. She smiled, a crack splitting her cheek, and she tapped on the glass with a long, twig-like finger. I screamed. The thing outside mimicked the sound, but it came out as the screech of bending branches. It wasn't my grandmother. It was something wearing her. Something that had been waiting in the dark hollow of that music box. The rules weren't superstition. They were seals. The flowers were an offering to keep it pleased. The salt was a barrier, and the music box was its prison. And I had broken the lock. The tapping became a scraping. The door handle began to jiggle. I remembered the salt. I stumbled to the cupboard, grabbed the big cardboard cylinder of cooking salt, and ran back to the kitchen doorway. I poured it in a frantic, shaking line across the threshold. Just as the back doors, locks snapped with a sound like a breaking bone. The thing shuffled in, moving with a jerky, root-tangling gate. It stopped at the inner kitchen doorway, right at the line of salt it made. It tilted its head, those black eyes reflecting the frantic image of me. It didn't cross. It just stood there, watching, smiling its splitting smile. That was 2 nights ago. It hasn't left. It stands at every salt line I make. I've barricaded myself in the living room, surrounded by rings of salt from every container in the house. I can hear it moving in the other rooms, a dry rustle in the walls, a tap on the window. The lullaby never stops. I've tried to find the music box to close it properly, but it's gone from the mantel. I think it has it. I think it's keeping its door open. My phone has no signal. The landline is dead. I am running out of salt, and I can hear it, whispering from the other side of the line, teaching me new rules. Rules for when the salt is finally gone. I shouldn't have opened my grandfather's journal. That's where this all started. My name is Ava, and I inherited my family's old cabin in the woods. It was supposed to be a fresh start after a brutal year, a quiet place to write, to heal. The realtor called it charming and full of potential. She didn't mention it was also full of other things. The cabin had been in the family for generations, but we never visited. My dad hated this place. He'd get tight-lipped and change the subject whenever it came up. When the lawyer told me it was mine, I saw it as a sign. I arrived on a Thursday. The key was under a mossy rock, just like he said. The silence was the first thing I noticed. Not a peaceful quiet, but a thick, heavy absence of sound. No birds, no wind in the pines. Just nothing. I found the journal in a locked trunk in the attic, the small key taped underneath it. The first few pages were mundane. Weather notes, supplies bought. But then the entries changed. The woods are quiet today. Too quiet. It is listening. And then a rule, underlined heavily. Do not acknowledge the whispers. Feed them no stories. What does that even mean? Tucked in the pages was this photograph. My grandfather is there, a young man. But look at the window of the cabin, behind the group. There's a shape, pale and indistinct, looking out. That first night, I heard scratching, not like an animal, but like fingernails, dragging slowly down the outside wall of the cabin, right below the attic window. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I told myself it was a branch. Of course it was a branch. But when I looked at the old pine tree beside the house the next morning, its nearest limb was a good 10 feet away from the wall. The journal entries became more disjointed. My grandfather wrote about the tenant, something that lived in the boundary between the forest and the home. It wasn't a ghost, he insisted. It was older, hungrier. It fed on narratives, on fears given shape by the human mind. You think about something scary in the dark, and it borrows that shape. It uses your own imagination against you. Sounds ridiculous, right? Just the ramblings of an old man, alone in the woods. The silence broke on the third night. I was almost asleep when I heard Ida low, rhythmic thump, 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 coming from the living room, like someone patiently bouncing a ball. I don't have a ball. My blood went cold. I lay there, paralyzed, listening. Then it stopped, and a new sound started. A soft, wet, dragging sound, moving slowly from the living room, down the hallway, stopping right outside my bedroom door. What's the worst sound you've ever heard in the dark? The one that made you pull the covers over your head. I didn't sleep. I stared at the door until dawn bleached the windows gray. When I finally found the courage to open it, the hallway was empty, but on the wooden floorboards, just outside my room, was a dark, damp stain. It smelled of ozone and wet earth. That was the moment I stopped trying to rationalize it. This was real. I was leaving. Screw the fresh start. Screw the inheritance. I threw my things into a suitcase, my hands trembling. I just had to get to my car. As I zipped the bag shut, the cabin groaned. Not a wind groan, but a deep, structural sound, like a great weight settling, and then, clear as day, from the heating vent near the floor, a child's voice whispered, "Don't go, Ava. We haven't finished our story." I ran for the front door. The knob wouldn't turn. I threw my shoulder against it. I checked the deadbolted was locked. From the inside, I hadn't locked it. I raced to the back door. Same thing. Every window was sealed shut, painted over by generations. The cabin had become a cage. My panic was a living thing in my chest. It feeds on narratives, the journal said. My terror was a 5-course meal. The lights flickered and died. The hum of the refrigerator ceased, plunging the cabin into a profound silence, broken only by the crackle of the fireplace. I grabbed the iron poker from the hearth. "What do you want?" I screamed into the gloom. My voice echoed back to me, but underneath it, I heard a faint, melodic humming, a lullaby my mother used to sing. It was coming from the attic. The attic stairs were down. I never left them down. I stood at the bottom, looking up into that perfect blackness. The humming had stopped. The only way out, I realized with a sickening dread, was through. The journal said the tenant was bound to the structure, to the land. Maybe if I understood, I could break the bond. I had to go up. I had to see. The air in the attic was freezing and smelled of decay and old paper. My breath fogged in the beam of my phone's flashlight. Everything was as Id left it, except for the trunk. It was open. and the journal was gone from inside. In its place was a single item, my own childhood teddy bear, one id lost in a move years ago. It was stained and damp. It takes what you give it. It wasn't just borrowing shapes from my imagination. It was pulling things from my memory. A cold draft swept through the attic, making the sheets billow. One slipped completely off an old, full-length mirror. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. In the reflection, the attic was the same, but I wasn't alone. Standing right behind my reflected self was a tall, slender figure made of shifting shadows and the texture of old bark. It had no distinct face, just a dark hollow where features should be. And it was leaning forward, its head next to mine, as if sharing a secret. I spun around, swinging the poker through empty air. There was nothing there, but in the mirror, the thing was still behind me, now touching my reflected shoulder with a branch-like finger. A voice, not in the room, but inside my head, layered with the sounds of rustling leaves and creaking wood, spoke. Your story is rich. We will taste it all. This was it. This was the climax. It was feeding on the narrative of my life, of my family's hidden pain. The journal's words flashed in my mind. Do not acknowledge the whispers. Feed them no stories. Acknowledging it gave it power. Fighting it was a story of conflict and fear. So I did the only thing I hadn't tried. I stopped. I shut my eyes, blocking out the mirror. I took a deep, ragged breath, and I forced my mind away from terror. I thought of boring, mundane things. Tax returns, grocery lists, the smell of fresh coffee. The pressure in the room lessened. The icy chill retreated. I opened my eyes. The mirror showed only me, pale and shaking, but alone. The silence returned, but it was different. Not hungry, just empty. I don't know how long I stood there. When I finally moved, my joints ached. I walked downstairs, my legs like jelly. The front door knob turned easily in my hand. The sun was setting, casting long, ordinary shadows across the clearing. I drove to a motel 20 miles away. I didn't call the police. What would I say? I slept for 14 hours straight. In the morning, I thought about selling the cabin, burning it down. But something stopped me, because when I got in my car to drive away for good, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and just for a second, in the back seat, I saw the reflection of that old teddy bear, sitting upright. Then it was gone. I am in a motel now, writing this all down. Maybe that's a mistake. Maybe I am feeding it again by giving it this narrative. But I had to tell someone. The journal was on my motel desk this morning. I didn't bring it with me. It's open to a new, blank page. And I have this terrible, compelling urge to pick up the pen, to keep writing, to see what story comes out next. Because the thing about a tenant is once it's moved in, it's very hard to get it to leave, and it always collects its rent. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt like something was listening to your thoughts in the dark, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay curious, but maybe don't go digging through the family attic. My grandmother left me 3 rules. I broke the first one the moment I arrived at her house. My name is Ava. 2 weeks ago, I inherited my grandmother's remote, rambling Victorian home, a place filled with more shadows than memories. The lawyer said Shed passed peacefully in her sleep, but the look in his eyes when he handed me the keys was anything but peaceful. It was a warning. The first rule was simple: never stay in the house after sunset. But my moving truck was late. The highway was a nightmare. And by the time I dragged my last box over the threshold, the sun was already a dying ember on the horizon. I told myself it was just an old woman's superstition. I was wrong. The first night, I heard the whispers, not from outside, or the wind, though there was plenty of that, moaning through the eavis-butt from inside the walls, a soft, rhythmic susurration, like pages of a book being turned very slowly. I chalked it up to old pipes, to settling timber, to my own exhaustion. But then I remembered the second rule. If you hear the house speaking, close your eyes and count to 100. Do not answer. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, my grandmother's old 4-poster, and squeezed my eyes shut. 97, 98, 99, a cold breath, smelling of damp soil and dried roses, washed over my face. I didn't open my eyes. Not until morning. By day, the house was just a house. Creaky, yes, full of bizarre collections of antique keys, porcelain dolls with cracked faces, and hundreds of books on botany and local folklore. In the attic, the source of the whispering, I found her journals and the box. The journals were mostly mundane, but one page stopped me cold. It was a floor plan of this very house, with a different, intricate symbol drawn in each room. In the margin, in her spidery script, it read, "The bindings. Do not disturb." The box, the one from my first day, was locked tight. No key in her vast collection fit it. I started to research the symbols. They weren't from any mainstream occult text I could find online. They felt older, more specific. A local historian I emailed called them warding signs, but of a particularly aggressive kind. Not for keeping things out, he wrote, but for keeping something in. That night, I made a cup of tea, trying to shake off the chill of his words. The kitchen was the warmest room, the most modernized. For a moment, I felt safe. Have you ever had that feeling where everything seems okay, but your reflection in a dark window just looks off? I turned around. Nothing was there, but the feeling of being watched clung to me like a second skin. The whispers changed. They became clearer, though no less nonsensical. Fragments of sentences in a language that tickled the back of my brain, but made no sense. The roots are hungry, one would sigh. The third key is bone, another would murmur. It was after midnight, and I needed to use the bathroom down the hall. I opened my bedroom door. The hallway was a tunnel of black, and at the top of the main staircase, where the second floor landing should be, I saw them. Two faint, shimmering points of light, not like a light bulb, like eyes, reflecting some light source that wasn't there. I froze. The third rule echoed in my head. Never, under any circumstances, look it in the face. I slammed my door, locked it, and spent the rest of the night pressed against it, listening to the slow, dragging footsteps that circled my room. Desperation makes you brave or stupid. The next morning, in the harsh, forgiving sunlight, I tore the attic apart. The bindings had to be connected to the box. If I could open it, maybe I'd find an explanation, a way to stop this. I found the key taped to the underside of her writing desk. It was cold to the touch, even in the warm attic air. The shaft wasn't metal, but a dark, polished wood that felt organic. The third key is bone. My hands shook as I fitted it into the box's lock. It turned with a soft, satisfying click. Inside the box was no dramatic relic, just a single photograph. It showed my grandmother as a much younger woman, standing right here on the front lawn. She wasn't smiling. Her hand was resting possessively on the trunk of a young tree in the garden, same gnarled, twisted oak that now dominated the backyard. But it was her eyes. They held a look of grim triumph, and a fatigue so deep it seemed to seep from the old photo. On the back, in that same script, the anchor is secure. The bargain holds. For now, I didn't understand. Not until I went back into the garden. The oak was ancient, its bark like tortured flesh. I'd avoided it before, put off by its oppressive presence. Now I saw what I'd missed. The ground around its base was utterly barreno grass. No weeds, just hard-packed, grayish soil. And the roots, they didn't just spread. They coiled like giant petrified serpents. They breached the earth, and one particularly thick root had grown in a perfect, deliberate circle around a large, flat stone. It didn't look natural. It looked like a collar or a seal. That's when the house truly woke up. I was inside when the sun set. I felt it the moment it dipped below the Teresa sudden heavy silence, followed by a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated up through the floorboards. Every light in the house went out. Not a power outage. The bulbs were fine. They just refused to glow. The whispers became a chorus, overlapping, insistent. She's here. She's awake. The root wants the seed. I fumbled for my phone. My flashlight app casting a pathetic beam that seemed to make the shadows thicker, more substantive. I ran to the front door. The handle wouldn't turn. The windows, when I tried them, felt like they were welded shut. My phone's light swept across the living room wall, and I saw it. The wallpaper was bulging, peeling back as if soaked from within, and beneath it, the symbols the bindings were drawn directly onto the plaster, and they were glowing, a sickly, pulsing red like embers. They were failing. Whatever my grandmother had bound here was breaking free. The dragging footsteps from the second floor began again. But this time, they were on the stairs. Thump, drag, thump, drag. I backed into the kitchen, the only room without a glowing symbol on its walls. A mistake. The back door was my last chance. As I fumbled with the deadbolt, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath fogged the air. I turned. It stood in the kitchen doorway. It wasn't a ghost. Not in any sense I understood. It was a shape of concentrated shadow and wrong angles, like a man made of tangled, blackened roots. Its face was a smooth, dark oval, except for 2 points of that same shimmering, reflective light. The thing in the house. I remembered the third rule too late. My eyes, wide with terror, were already locked on that faceless void. It didn't move toward me. It simply pointed a long, twig-like finger toward the back door. The message was clear. The deadbolt clicked open by itself. I stumbled out into the freezing night, falling onto the barren earth before the great oak. The stone within the root collar had been pushed aside. The hole it revealed was deep, dark, and exhaling a smell of loam and decay. The roots around the edges were quivering. The thing was beside me then, not with a body, but as a presence, a pressure. A thought, cold and sharp as an icicle, pierced my mind. The anchor needs a keeper. The bargain must hold. I understood then. My grandmother hadn't just bound this thing. She'd bargained with it. Her life, her presence, had been the anchor that kept it contained to the house, to the tree. And now she was gone. I didn't run. Where would I go? It was in the roots of the land, in the bones of the house. It showed me, in a flood of cold images, what would happen if the anchor failed. The blight would spread. The whispers would leave these walls. So I made my own bargain. I would stay. I would be the new keeper. The sun rose. The lights in the house came back on. The symbols on the walls faded to mere ink. a false safety, so complete and quiet it was more terrifying than the night. I packed a suitcase, just one, a performance of normalcy. I sat on the front porch, listening to the morning birds, and beneath their song, I heard Itanu whisper just for me from the soil beneath my feet. Welcome home, granddaughter. I live here now. I follow the rules. I tend the garden. I feed the roots. And at night, when the house speaks, I don't just listen, I answer. The bargain holds. For now, but sometimes, when I am trimming the hedges or reading by the window, I catch my reflection, and my eyes, they have the same faint, shimmering light I saw at the top of the stairs. My grandmother's third rule was never for my protection. It was to keep me from seeing what I would one day become. The thing is, viewers, what's the one rule you've been told that you've always been tempted to break? Maybe you should listen. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this descent into inherited horror, please give this video a like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Share your own family rules or strange inheritances in the comments below. Until next time, sleep well. My grandmother's will stipulated I had to spend one full night alone in her house to inherit it. I thought it was just her final, quirky attempt to force some family connection. I was wrong. The house, you see, didn't just belong to her. It belonged to the thing she'd been feeding. The lawyer handed me the key with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just a formality, Ava. Sign the papers in the morning. The house was a Victorian pile on the edge of town, all gingerbread trim and shadows. It'd only been here as a child, and my memories were a blur of stale lavender and hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room. The first thing I did was explore. It was mostly empty, save for the attic. That's where I found her collection. Not china or photos, but boxes. Dozens of them, all locked, all carved with the same unsettling patterns. One box, smaller than the rest, was tucked under the eaves. Its lock was rusted shut, but the hasp was loose. I used a letter opener from the desk downstairs. Inside, resting on crimson velvet that was bleached pink in one spot, was a single yellowed molar, not a baby tooth, an adult molar. A small, folded note was tucked beside it. The handwriting was my grandmother's, spidery and rushed. It read for the quiet. A chill, completely separate from the attic's damp air, went through me. I dropped the box. The tooth skittered across the floorboards and vanished into a dark corner. That's when I heard it, a soft, wet clicking sound, like a tongue probing a gap in a mouth, coming from that same corner. It stopped the moment I focused on it. Okay, Ava, old houses settle. Pipes knock. This is just a weird, morbid heirloom. What's the creepiest thing you've ever found in a relative's house? Let me know in the comments, because I think I am in the lead. I decided to wait out the night in the kitchen. It felt the least haunted. As I made tea, the familiar routine calmed me. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked loudly. I sipped my tea. I froze. That wasn't the clock. It was that same wet click, now coming from the hallway. I held my breath. The house held its breath with me. I let out a shaky laugh. My nerves were just shot. I finished my tea, the rational part of my brain firmly in charge. This was just a strange, but ultimately harmless test. I must have dozed off on the living room sofa. I woke not to a sound, but to a smell. It was the thick, coppery scent of blood, mixed with that old lady lavender. My eyes snapped open. The room was pitch black, the digital clock on the stove dead. The smell was overpowering, and underneath it, a new sound, a low, rhythmic shushing, like someone slowly dragging a heavy sack across the floor upstairs. Directly above me, I didn't move. I couldn't. The dragging stopped. Then a new sound began. A drip, slow, deliberate. Something was leaking through the ceiling. I fumbled for my phone, my hands slick with sweat, and turned on the flashlight. I aimed it upward. A dark, reddish-brown stain was blooming across the plaster, like a sick flower. A single, viscous drop gathered at its center, swelled and fell. It landed with a soft tap on the floorboards beside the couch. It wasn't water. It was too thick. The smell confirmed it. Logic shattered. Every instinct screamed to run out the front door. But a colder, more terrifying thought gripped me. If I ran, I failed the will's condition. The house and whatever was in it would be sold. Or worse, someone else would move in. My grandmother had lived with this for decades. She'd left me that tooth for a reason. For the quiet. Was it a payment? A bribe? I had to go back to the attic. The flickering light from the open attic door was an invitation or a trap. Each step creaked a confession. The clicking sound started again. But now it was layered, coming from multiple points in the attic above. It was a language. The smell of blood and lavender was so strong it coated my tongue. I reached the top. The attic was transformed. The boxes were all open, their lids thrown back, and from each box, a soft, golden light glowed, like embers in a hearth. The air was warm, and hummed with a low, resonant frequency I felt in my teeth. In the center of the room, where id dropped the small box, the light from all the others pooled and coalesced. It wasn't a person. It was a presence, a concentration of warmth, and that terrible, sweet smell. It had no fixed shape, but within the swirl of light and shadow, saw flashes the curve of a jaw, the socket of an eye, the gleam of something white and hard. It was made of teeth, not just the molar from the box, but hundreds, thousands of them, all held together by the glowing, viscous light. This was the quiet my grandmother had fed. This was the air. It didn't attack. It regarded me. The clicking softened into a sound, almost like a purr. A wave of warmth, of profound, drowsy contentment washed over me. It was the most peaceful I'd ever felt. All my fear, my anxiety, the constant noise in my own head, it just drained away. This was the quiet. This was the gift. And I understood my grandmother's bargain. A lifetime of peace in exchange for a place to stay and an occasional offering. The thing extended a tendril of light toward me, not to hurt me, to show me. In the light, I saw my grandmother, old and smiling, peacefully asleep in her bed. I saw my own mother, her migraine-ravaged face smooth and calm. The peace it offered was real. My hand rose almost of its own accord. The quiet was so tempting, to never feel that gnawing worry again, to sleep without dreams. My fingertip neared the light. The warmth was incredible. Then I remembered the stain on the ceiling, the coppery smell. The quiet wasn't free. It was bought. The offerings in the boxes weren't just teeth. They were pieces of people, of their pain, perhaps of their very lives, given to sustain this thing. My peace would be someone else's nightmare. I snatched my hand back. The purring stopped. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold so deep it felt surgical. The light in the core turned from gold to a blinding, angry white. The clicking became a furious, rattling cacophony, like a hailstorm of bones. The lids of all the boxes slammed shut at one banga sound that felt like it cracked the world. The peace was gone, replaced by a silent, howling rage that came not as sound, but as pressure, trying to crush my mind. I stumbled back, fell down the first few stairs, and scrambled, fell, crawled the rest of the way down. I spent the rest of the night with my back against the front door, waiting for the sun. The lawyer came at 9 a.m. sharp. I signed the papers without a word. He didn't ask about my night. I think he knew better. I own the house now. I tried to sell it, but the paperwork, it always gets lost. So I stay. I live in the downstairs rooms. The attic door is locked, braced with a steel bar. It's quiet, too quiet. And last night, while brushing my teeth, I felt a familiar, deep ache in my jaw, a molar on the lower left side. It's loose,